Welcome back. It's about time we added our first endpoint. We'll start with getting the list of target planets that we want to explore and returning that from the API so that we can set the destination of our missions. We're going to be dealing with planets data, and so we'll create a planets collection in our routes. The way we're going to organize this is by creating a new folder for each of our collections, so say planets, and under planets, we'll have a dedicated planets router, which I'm going to call planets.router.js. Here, we're going to take advantage of our built-in Express router. So we need access to Express, so I'm going to import that, require Express. And I'm going to say const planets router equals express.router. And now on this planets router, I can define all my routes. So let's start with getting all the planets. What's this going to look like? Well, it's going to be a GET request on the /planets collection. So we can do planets router.get because it's a GET request, and our collection is going to be under the planets path. We're going to handle these GET requests to /planets with some function that we're going to call getAllPlanets. And we'll implement that in just a second. But to use our router, we need to export it from this module so that we can make use of it in our app.js, which has all of our Express middleware. And remember, our router is just another type of middleware that groups together related routes. And so we're going to be grouping all of our planets-related routes in this file. All right, so let's do a module.exports, and we'll set the exports object to just be this planets router. Now in app.js, I'm going to import that router. So const planets router equals require, and let's get the path right. So it's going to be /routes/planets/planets.router. Looks right. So now we can take this planets router and just add it underneath our JSON parsing middleware with app.use, planets router. Now we're starting to build up this chain of middleware that handles requests as they come into our application. The request comes in to Express, gets checked for the JSON content type, if we're passing in some data, and then goes through our Express router, which handles first all of these planets routes. Now, we still need this getAllPlanets function, and that's going to come from the planets controller. Remember that the controller takes in actions and requests from the user and works with them to update the models. And instead of adding a controllers folder, we're going to keep our controllers next to our routers. So I'm going to create a file for our planets.controller.js. It makes sense to group these two files together because the router is going to be making direct use of the controller. And we don't want to move around too far to find this related code. So now we're going to create our getAllPlanets function. Function getAllPlanets, and it takes a request and a response. And for now, let's keep it really simple. So we're going to have some array of planets. Let's set that to an empty array for now. And we're just going to return or respond with a 200 status code and that array as JSON. So res.status200.json planets. Now, this status code here is optional because Express returns 200 by default, but I'm adding it here so we remember to set the status code appropriately for all of our responses. And you might see some Express code that returns whenever it sets the response. This is just to make sure that our controller functions only ever set the response once. Because if you remember, when we try to respond multiple times, Express will complain about the headers already being set. Because once you set the response, it's locked in. So the return value of our controller functions isn't used by Express. We're just using the return to make sure that our function stops executing and only one response is ever set. Now, you'll see a lot of Express code that doesn't use this pattern, but it's generally a good idea because it prevents unexpected bugs. And you're being explicit about the fact that wherever there's a return is where your function stops executing. So we're going to leave it in there. The more readable your code is, the more obvious it is what your code is doing, the easier your life will be when things start getting a little bit more complicated. All right, and in our simple example here, it's this planets array that's actually our planets model. This is the data as it's being stored in the server, as we're accessing it. So, inside of our models, let's create a file for our planets model, planets.model.js. And now you can see why we might be naming our files in this .model.js, .controller.js pattern. All of these files are related to our planets. And if we're doing a search through our files here, and we see a bunch of planets.js files, well, it won't be clear what the role of that file actually is. Now we can move that planets array into our planets model and set the module.exports to be that array. I know this is a trivial example, but what we're learning here is how to structure our code so that when it is more complicated, things are nice and organized. I've personally used this exact structure on large-scale projects with hundreds of thousands of users. And as an added benefit, we get cleaner, more readable code. All right, so let's update our controller to make use of that planets model by requiring it. So we're going to say planets equals require, and this time we have to go up out of our planets folder and out of our routes folder into models, getting our planets model. And finally, we export our getAllPlanets function. And we're going to return it as an object because there's going to be multiple functions that might be returned from our controller. So it's just going to be getAllPlanets. And in our router, let's make sure we're using the function from our controller. So right here below Express, we'll say const planets controller equals require in the same folder, planets.controller, and that's it. So now we could call planets controller.getPlanets, or we could destructure this planets controller object that's returned from our module over here and just say that getAllPlanets is a function that's returned from the planet's controller. This is better because now we know exactly what functions and variables we'll be using in this file. Now we could add any other functions in the same way, using them directly when we specify our routes. Finally, let's add our first endpoint to our mission control front end. And we're going to go into that client folder where we had that requests.js file under hooks. So we're going to be filling in the functionality to get our planets. We'll be using the fetch function that's built into our browser. So we'll say fetch, and remember, our client and server are on different ports. The client is on port 3000, and we set our backend API to run on 8000 by default. So we need to specify that when we make our request. We'll say the fetch is to localhost using the HTTP protocol on port 8000 to the /planets collection. And our fetch function returns a promise. So we're going to await the result of that promise. And because our getPlanets function is already async, we're able to use the await keyword. And the rest is simple. We'll set this to our response, const response. Last but not least, we need to return it as JSON because we're returning that JavaScript object in our controller. It's JSON. Or for our planets, it's an array of JavaScript objects. So we just need to call return response.json. And the JSON function also returns a promise, so we're going to await it before we return. Let's move this comment up out of our function. And let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see. All of our HTTP functions are going to be made against our single API. So let's move this address of our API out into a constant. We'll say const API underscore URL equals localhost, and I need to put it in quotes. And then we'll use our template string syntax here to add the API URL before our planets collection. Now, because our usePlanets React code is already calling this HTTP getPlanets function over here, it's time for us to check if everything is working. In our terminal, we'll need to start our server. Remember, our server is an npm package, so we can go cd server and run npm start. And now in this terminal, our server is listening on port 8000, but we need to start our front end, which is being served on port 3000. So we'll create another terminal. I'll use this built-in VS Code feature here. And I'll cd this time into client and run npm start from there. Let's see if our endpoint is being called correctly. If we go to our dropdown, well, nothing's showing up, but we're just returning an empty array, so let's check in our console. We have this warning here because our launches code isn't implemented yet, so that's fine. But if we scroll up, we're getting this CORS error because the origin for our API and for our front end is different. Remember, the origin includes both the URL host name, which is localhost, but also the port number. And so because we're trying to make a cross-origin request, we're trying to get the list of planets from localhost at port 8000 and not from localhost at port 3000. Well, to support this, we're going to need to set that CORS header. Remember the one that looks like access control allow origin? Let's find out how to set this very important header in the next video. I'll see you soon.